Hey guys, Gisa with Journey to Programming here. What I want to show you guys is how do you prepare for technical coding tests, okay? So when you're applying for jobs in the software development world, a lot of you guys are going to face your interview process, and you guys are going to hopefully get to the point where you're getting interviews where you actually have to code. And when you first start out and you haven't done a technical interview or a coding round, it is nerve-wracking, and it's very difficult to kind of comprehend the process unless you've been prepared. I know in my undergraduate studies, I was not prepared for the technical rounds, not as prepared as I would have liked, and I think that it could definitely be improved upon by just a little bit of kind of transparency on how the process works. For a lot of you guys out there that don't have a computer science background, you guys maybe don't know how this works already. And for those of you in computer science departments, I hope your guys' professors have been showing you guys how important it is to understand data structures and algorithms, and how important it is to know how to write them off the top of your head, especially the stuff you're learning in your undergraduate studies. You really do need to know how to implement a tree, a binary tree, how to write a binary search kind of algorithm. You need to be able to write some of your data structures and sorting algorithms on the fly. You have to know, maybe not, you maybe don't always have to know how to write a hashing function, but you should at least know the way it's structured in order to account for collisions occurring and how to reduce collisions occurring depending on the size of the data set. And you should also understand how trees are effective for different types of problems. And then you should also understand linked lists. I've been asked to implement linked lists on multiple occasions. If you don't know how to implement a single linked list, a double linked list, and how to do simple manipulations with them, to traverse them, how to detect if they're looping or circular, how to detect if they collide with one another, or kind of overlay one another. So you have, in that case, you'd have two linked lists. They begin at a different root point, but then at some point they converge, and then they continue on from there. How do you detect that? You need to be able to practice that type of stuff. And in industry, a lot of the times you unfortunately don't do those types of problems. But when you do interviews, your technical rounds are generally those types of coding puzzles or problems which expect you to know how all the data structures, the sorting algorithms, and how all of it really works, how to traverse them, how to write them from scratch, what their time complexities are, and a lot of that information which you generally learn in your CS education. So again, those of you that don't have the CS background formally, you guys can look this stuff up. Definitely be prepared. Web development jobs, desktop software development jobs, and mobile jobs. If it's a mid-sized company and up, I would always expect them to give you a programming test. And most companies nowadays will give you either an online programming test. They'll send you a link to possibly one of the websites I'm going to show you guys right here in a few minutes. Or they're going to want to do a screen share with you and watch you type code like Google and Facebook will do to questions that they're asking you live. So let's go ahead and transition over to looking at some of these websites. So if you take a look on my screen here, we should see that basically I have Google the background here, and I'm going to show you guys what to look for in general when you guys are trying to find practice coding websites, okay? So coding interview practice. I'm just going to type that in and see what comes up. So the first thing that comes up I'm seeing is InterviewBit. This is one that provides you with interview questions and an area to kind of learn how the process works. Geeks for Geeks, they're a huge website. They have tons of descriptions, and they really break it down into the science, the code, and give you a bunch of examples to try and understand how to do it yourself. And I definitely recommend Geeks for Geeks as a reference source. Just remember, not all of their descriptions are spot on, and they're not always very clear. So sometimes you need to mix and match. You maybe need a book on data structures and a book on algorithms in order to really get the benefit out of it. Interview Cake, I have not used Interview Cake. Let's see. free preview of our full course, some kind of class or something like that. Let's take a look. HackerRank. HackerRank is a popular one. So this will give you kind of programming problems to do online. And then they have a compiler in the browser, and then you get to go in and answer them and compile it online, and you'll get immediate feedback where you're wrong, or not where you're wrong, if you solve the problem or not. It'll give you a good idea for how these types of problems work. And also, I think some companies actually will send you a link with a HackerRank program. LeetCode. LeetCode is a common one. So LeetCode's one that I have a lot of experience with, and I have received links to do LeetCode problems before, but I've also been told by companies before to use LeetCode as a reference for programming practice, okay? So I already logged into one of my old accounts here just to give you guys a little idea. And I'm going to go to the section here called Problems and show you guys what this stuff looks like. So you can see I have some checkboxes on the left-hand side here. That signifies that I've gone through and I've submit this. I think on this account I used it to show some of my old students when I was teaching how to go ahead and use LeetCode as a resource and how to prepare for the coding interviews. So let me go ahead and show you guys TwoSum, which is the title of one of the problems. It's a very easy one to do. This is going to load up a editor. You can see here on the right. And then a problem statement on the left-hand side, which then you can use the combination of the two to really write code in the coding side, compile it by going to run code, and then when you feel confident, you can submit your problem, and what will happen is the web-based platform will put it through a variety of test cases. So when you run code here, it only runs a single test case against your code to see if it works. So if I look at this, there's only a single test case, and this section on the left-hand side explains the problem statement and how to structure the test cases and how the test cases are being given to your program. On the right-hand side, again, this is your coding window. What they're expecting you to do is to implement this function for this particular problem, and that's how these programming tests usually are. Normally, they're going to give you some kind of programming window, or they're going to ask you, can you go ahead and implement this binary search algorithm to act as a single module in this overarching kind of architecture that we're trying to develop, or I want you to talk about in our interview, okay? So once you've written your code here, you go ahead and run code. You could change up your test case a few times to make sure that your code is robust enough to pass the, I think, probably 100, 200, maybe even up to 1,000 test cases that they're going to pass in. And then once you've gotten successful at running your code, go ahead and submit it. Let's see what happens. I have the compile error. Obviously, it's all empty. I'm not returning an array of ints, so it probably doesn't happen. It's not too happy with that. But you can see it also keeps a log of your successes and your failures. Let's see. I have some cases from 3 years ago that ran in 36 milliseconds. I have some cases from a year ago that ran in about 1 second, so 1,000 milliseconds. Let me go ahead and load up one of these at the 1,000 millisecond mark and see what happened. So here's my old source code. It looks like it was just a simple C# solution, probably a naive approach. Oh, and I have some print statements in here. But this passed. What's cool about this is after you submit something that's passed, you can take a look at these awesome visualizations that they share with you, which compare and contrast your runtime complexity to the average, so to everybody else. And it kind of gives you an idea for, did you create an optimal solution in comparison to what everybody else did or not? If you did not, you can take a look at what other people did. Also, you can change the languages, which is really cool. So there's a way, which I'm not seeing at this very moment, to take a look and review the average speeds for different languages. This is C#. Remember, C# has garbage collection in it and automatic memory management. So it sometimes is not necessarily as fast. It's also not as low level. C++ is a high level language, but it does give you access to memory a little bit more freely. That's a little bit more dangerous, but you can potentially write faster code if you know what you're doing. And C, if you want to do your code in C, will be pretty fast as well. C++, some old solutions were running in sub 100 milliseconds. So it looks like everything in here is under 50 milliseconds. Let's see what this one was for 16 milliseconds. Okay, so it looks like I used a dictionary to solve this problem. So that would explain it. You're looking at a dictionary or a kind of a map, a very simple form of a hash table. Not really a hash table because we're not really hashing anything. But it's a dictionary, which your insertions are going to be almost instantaneous, right? And your lookups are going to be almost instantaneous in this case as well, because you're mapping a key and a value pair. So if you end up using it, it's really fast. Again, I'm not going to jump into implementation. I just want to show you guys these resources. So let's go back to Google here and CodeByte. I've taken a look at CodeByte. There's some fun ones out there too. So Interviewing.io, I think they'll actually interview you and simulate what a real interview would be like. So they have get free interviews here. There's a bunch of platforms out there that let you actually pay people like $50 or $100, and they're either professionals in the industry that do the interviews for companies. I know I've done this before where I've had people pay me to do mock interviews, but there are a handful of platforms out there that do it as well. They'll basically set up a web chat, like a Hangouts call with you, and they'll simulate you going through a technical interview with them on that chat. So let's take a look. There's a few other ones out there. So CodeFights. CodeFights is more of a competitive version with some gaming elements and gamification to it. And I know there's another one called CodeKata. I don't see it up here right now. Let me just take a look at it. Look for it. CodeKata. So that's definitely not the one I was thinking for. Code Wars. And I think in this one you receive Kata for solving problems. So again, I just wanted to show you guys the resources that are readily available for you if you are looking to practice for your coding interviews and you have a technical coming up, or you know you're going to be interviewing and submitting applications right now or in the near future. You want to begin practicing right now, and even after your interviews, you want to keep on practicing until you're in a job and you're secure. You should be practicing these skills, and even when you're at that job, you should continue doing it. These are all web-based kind of platforms that will help you develop these programming / technical interview skills. There's also a few book resources out there. I've got my book coming out here next month that's going to talk about the interview process. It doesn't jump into the technical interviewing skills as in depth. But there's also another great book out there, Cracking the Coding Interview. That's a great one, very common one that everybody uses in the industry. It's your call if you want to buy that and have a physical copy in hand and be able to work out of that book. Or you can just use these websites. I personally like using LeetCode, but I do own a couple copies of Cracking the Coding Interview too. Again, this is Isa with Journey to Programming. Have a good one, you guys. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and leave any comments you have down below.